Bonjour à tous. Welcome to the Nouvel Esprit Podcast. We are your hosts, Guillermo Moreno.
Jeremy Hausotter.
Charles Massiatte.
And today we're excited to begin the first podcast episode for Le Nouvel Esprit. So we decided to go this route via podcasting because it's just an excellent way of exercising our freedom of speech. In this day and age, there's so many amazing voices out there on social media, and it's great to be a part of that as well. We have a lot of people sharing their voices, and here we are taking that route as well, looking to reach as many, just as wide an audience as possible. And it's just also, uh, I think, a necessary method for the new evangelization. But to get started, I think it'd be a good idea to talk about the website. So maybe we have listeners who are listening to the podcast and haven't really checked out our website. So let's talk a little bit about that. Uh, Jeremy, could you share with us a little bit about La Nouvelle Esprit and our mission and goal and so forth?
Yeah, so about two winters ago, I was having a conversation with my best friends. We went to Franciscan together for the master's theology program and found out that he had several complaints about Vatican II and that he adopted a hermeneutic of rupture instead of continuity. And given the extent of what it was he believed, I realized that the only effective means of fighting these erroneous views was to start a website. And when that idea struck me, I felt that the Holy Spirit was calling me to do this. And so then I reached out to Guillermo and I was like, hey, do you want to join me on this crusade to promote Vatican II and personalism? And he just signed up immediately. So what are your thoughts about our website, Guillermo?
Um, my thoughts. I I think I'm coming from a social cultural perspective. There, just we live in a time when ideologies are just more contagious, shall we say. So the angle that I'm coming from is based on, and then I've also had my share of these conversations with people who I'm just gonna say it, who dissent from the church's teaching. And what struck me, and this is something that I wondered a long time ago. eh, I knew that when it comes to just one thing that I really want to point out is that we can talk about how some things that the church says people reject, and overwhelmingly those issues, they're what we deem liberal issues, or I would say even leftist issues. And we can go into detail about what those issues are, but I always wondered if it was possible, if it was a thing to dissent from the church's teaching on the right, like if there was a right wing manifestation of dissent from what the church says. That's why I don't use what I was saying real quick. I don't use the terms liberal Catholic and conservative Catholic when it comes to what you who what one person who identifies as Catholic accepts or rejects. Rather, I use the phrase faithful Catholic and dissenting Catholic. So a faithful Catholic is someone who believes everything that the church says and doesn't pick and choose what they believe, whereas a dissenting Catholic picks and chooses what they want, and overwhelmingly the issues that they uphold, if they dissent from the church's teaching, they're left-leaning issues. But
Yeah.
I came across this right-wing uh dissent, not attitude, what's the word I'm looking for, worldview. I guess this right wing worldview, in a manner of
Yeah.
speaking. And just real quick, I do see it as venomous as left wing dissent.
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly it's kind of all worldview.
Okay.
Um, and that's precisely what it is we need to be addressing.
Hmm.
And it's partly how, like, through the web pages, through our articles we write. It's why I cite the various sources of magisterium so heavily. It's like, this is what our church teaches,
Hmm.
you know?
Exactly.
Yeah. 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 Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that these um maybe right wing isn't quite the word, but this alt right voice had been spreading like wildfire on social media. I had no idea how big they were until I entered social media, but they're big, and they were growing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
well, this is just a form of apologetics, honestly. La Nouvel Esprit, where
Exactly.
yeah, we're defending what the church says from
And
this angle in
yeah.
particular. Yeah.
And this is partly why we have our podcast, because we need to present a different voice from crazy people on the left, crazy people on the right. And
Yeah.
as you said, we have to categorize it not in terms of left and right, but in terms of faithful and dissenting
Yes.
individuals. We
Beautiful.
have
Beautiful.
to shift the framework for, to realize that you can have people that lean more left and people that lean more to the right, but at the end of the day, it's about, do you affirm what the church teaches?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because as everyone should know, there's no salvation outside the church. So
Mm-hmm.
when you start picking and choosing, you run a risk of your salvation when you start picking and choosing. That's fundamentally what is at stake and my concern.
Precisely. And one thing that I want to mention as well is that these ideas, let's just hash them out. I'll go into more detail about why I think uh, a persecution of censorship is almost inevitable from both uh, the left and the right, shall we say. So I don't want to go into too much detail just now, but we have to have these conversations. We have to address these, and
Yeah.
truth will speak for itself. It will, but
Yeah.
it can't. That can't happen without the conversation.
Yeah, we need to be a center of dialogue. I
Mm,
have seen that on the right, just on social media, myself being censored from some different
yeah.
platforms and whatnot,
Wow.
just different places that run by more traditionally inclined
Hmm.
people that tend to be dissenting.
Hmm. Yeah. One little excerpt that I want to read from our About Us pages. Our first aim is to present Catholic points of view grounded in tradition, but not traditionalist. The term traditionalist has been co opted by groups which consider themselves as faithful to the deposit of faith and yet reject the current magisterium in some manner. We therefore object to this co option and seek to reinstate the term its positive meaning. Now, and I do want us to go into more detail about the people who are dissenting. But today's topic, I really want to address just who we are. So, if we could each give a brief bio and a testimony of our Catholic faith. So, yeah, who we are and what I really want to zone in on is our faith journey. I also want us to talk about where each of us is coming from regarding our worldviews, our personalities, and our testimonies and charisms and our vocations. Also, I think just ultimately we have this website with its end goal, and I think each of us personally we have particular hopes for this website and for this mission. What is that hope? What are those hopes? What is that end goal for each of us, in a manner of speaking personally? Why are we researching, writing, and now podcasting for La Nouvelle Esprit? So, in other words, today's topic is, who are we and why us? Jeremy, I do invite you to uh, start us off because um, you are just you have a master's in theology and philosophy. So just something that, and I do hope that we touch on at some point, the topics of personalism, existentialism, and phenomenology. But that's just such a necessary angle in this day and age. If you could start us off with your bio
Yeah,
and your testimony and so forth, please.
yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a Catholic family, cradle Catholic here, but I never really took my faith seriously until I was in college studying hardware and software engineering. At that time, I was studying a non-denominational Christian girl, and she and I decided that we were going to sit down and try and figure out what is the true religion. So I so we agreed that we were going to wipe our slates clean and hold no theological views. We're just going to figure out what does the Bible say, what does church fathers say, and figure out what is the true religion. However, there were two propositions to me that I thought were indubitably true. Whatever the Catholic said about Mary and the teachings about the Eucharist, and it turns out you can't be anything but Catholic if you hold those views. So, long story short, that relationship did not work out. And during that time, I had switched programs into studying math. So I graduated from Eastern Oregon University with my bachelor's in applied mathematics. Went to graduate school at University of Washington, Pullman, studying math. And one day when I was there, I had this realization I was just absolutely bored studying math. I spent 2 hours looking at donut recipes instead of studying for my math exam that day. And at that point, I realized I need to be studying something else. So I was like, I knew that I was called to study something. I had no idea what. I realized I was going to be bored with all the examples I came up with, the various sciences, engineering, whatever.
Hmm.
And then I prayed. I asked God, okay, what should I study? And there was a still moment of clarity. And I heard a distinct voice in my head say, theology and philosophy. And I was like, okay, where at? I'm going to do this. The school Scott Hahn teaches at. So at this point, I knew who Scott Hahn was, but I had no idea where he taught. So I Googled it, Franciscan University, applied. I was there next semester. In 19 months, got my master's in theology. Then about a year and a half later, I got my master's in philosophy. Um, After that, during the philosophy program, I met my wife online, Catholic match. We got engaged, got married, and then ever since then, I've been teaching high school and middle school math. And then, as far as kind of like a vocation goes, obviously, husband and father, have 3 kids, and now apparently a dog, some stray that we found that had he was wounded on his foot, so we fixed him up, and now he's living with us. And then I guess I always felt that academic my academic studies were incomplete, but I had no idea what to do. Um, so I think really this website and now this podcast is kind of God's way of showing me my way forward in terms of where to hone my academic skills. At Franciscan University, started out as a math guy, and everyone here is talking theological terms. So it's kind of bewildering at first, going from the hard science to the liberal arts. And while studying theology, you have all these amazingly trained theologians cite all sorts of authors such as Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Chaucer. JP2 cites Ovid in his Theology of the Body in a footnote. You just have this rich classical education that these thinkers had. You know, Benedict 16 cites Nietzsche and the rock band Kansas and Jesus of Nazareth. JP2 at one time or another quote Juvenal, another Roman author. And so that for me was a moment of self-realization. I needed to start reading classics. So I read Homer, Sophocles, and of course many others. Got into Dostoevsky and Tolstoy heavily. And ironically, now I work at a classical academy where that is one of our ideals is bringing students into this living encounter with the great text. And one of the most monumental changes for me was reading the Theology of Body for the first time because people will say it's a Thomistic work, but they don't know what they're talking about. It's a phenomenological inspired work. There's certainly Thomistic elements, but it's not a purely Thomistic account the of anthropology and human sexuality. It's phenomenologically grounded. And so that led me to studying phenomenology and existentialism at Franciscan University. Dr. John Crosby there heads the Hildebrand Project, which seeks to reintroduce the writings of Dietrich von Hildebrand, one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century, eminent phenomenologist, personalist. I got about 20 of those books on my shelf. He's just an amazing thinker. I took a lot of inspiration from existentialists such as Martin Buber and Kierkegaard, other thinkers, of course, Wojtyła and Edith Stein. Um, Guillermo, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you for sharing, Jeremy.
My
Yeah,
pleasure.
yeah. So my angle, my just firstly, so I was born and raised in the Los Angeles area, and I'm from an immigrant family. My parents are from El Salvador, and I was raised Catholic. I was baptized Catholic, and I can't say that my family was nominally Catholic as I think, well, yeah, that's just a little bit of my bio, just to not go into too much detail. I will say that at some point after my confirmation, and even a little bit during my confirmation retreat, I would say, was when I had that encounter with Christ in a way that okay, what I experienced here, I know I can't just, I can't pretend like it didn't happen. So rather than my parents dragging me to church, I would drag myself to church. I wasn't fond of going to church. Um, yeah, I'll say that I wasn't fond of going to church in and of itself, but some things I kind of just really thought through, like, okay, if the requirement, just for lack of other words right now, is 1 hour a week, okay, it's not gonna kill me. So I would do that. And shortly after having completed my confirmation, I was invited to a youth ministry. That's where I became more involved in my faith. And long story, very, very short, it was when I was an undergraduate. So I attended a Cal State and here in the Los Angeles area, where sure, it's not the it's not a hospitable environment for people of faith at all. In some ways, it was um yeah, it was intellectually challenging. Let's just put it that way. But providentially, I came across some of the works by specifically by Jason Everett. So it was towards the end of my freshman year uh, as an undergraduate that something happened, and I'll share in more detail on a separate episode just because it's a long story, but long story short, I came across one of Jason Everett's booklets called Pure Manhood, and that's where I was first exposed to Pope John Paul II's theology of the body. So two things happened there, just most especially. First of all, this providential event happened that I just don't think was a coincidence. I refuse to believe that just because no way would I be here to this day. The history would have been extremely different. But well, that the providence, divine providence, in a way that I certainly didn't expect. Why would God go out of his way to talk to me or to address me for crying out loud? So I read this book, and first of all, it was um the word that comes to mind is intelligible. Oh, now I get it. Like, oh, the church says this, the church says that, but here it was explained to me in my language, quote unquote, in a way that I could understand and just really then be able to embrace all the more. Number two, number three, the third thing that happened was that um, I uh, repent isn't the right word, but oh, well, that's when I found this is what I've been looking for. This answers so many of the questions that we all have just because of our nature as human beings, our intellect and our will. Like this is the end, this is the point, this is yeah, the answer to our questions. This whatever this is, it's what's going to fulfill us, it's what fulfills the human heart, it's what's going to bring us true happiness. So all those three things happened all at once, and um I don't know if Peter Crift himself is the one who came up with the phrase of a Jesus high. So I went through that Jesus high, and I went so far as to even start a club at my Cal State to promote this message. And I kept it secular because we could talk about these things rationally. Um, wow, the lashback was intense. Um, just long story, very very short. Two main things happened. My peers, they there was no convincing them. There was no convincing them, even though hey, this made sense to me. Why isn't it making sense to you? And long story very short, when I was able to refute some of my peers' objections, I was just cut off. I uh I was deleted on Facebook. I was essentially, I don't know if canceled is the right way to put it, because it's not like I had a platform, but what I was saying made sense and it didn't fit people's, not agenda, but what's the word I'm looking for? Um, they just didn't hear what they wanted to hear, and so I just lost some friendships that way. But that's what was happening with my peers. My professors, the ones that I was close to, thank God, they were more fair. They would sit me down in their office hours and they would tell me, okay, Memo, how do we know that what you're saying is true? So there was that intellectual challenge, and I was up against people with masters and PhDs, and you know, I was able to stand my ground, just for lack of other words. I couldn't quite refute anything that they were saying, but they couldn't convince me either. They couldn't convince me either. And there was this tug of war going on, of course, in my head and in my heart, and just with a lot of things that were going on in my life at the time. I just wondered, you know, where can I study this? The Catholic faith. If if it's even possible to study this at the college level. Is that a thing? And I found out, yeah, it is. Holy smokes! Whoa, where can I go? Where can I learn more about this? So I went to my original source, Jason Everett's book, Pure Manhood, and I went to his the little bio, and it says that Jason Everett got a master's in theology from the Franciscan University of Steubenville, and I said that's where I'm going. And just long story short, here I am. And so that's just my bio, my testimony. Here's the angle where I'm coming from regarding all this, and just for lack of other words, who I am. Fast forwarding to when I worked as the liturgy coordinator. I was a liturgy coordinator after having graduated from Franciscan. There was one other staff member who I got along with particularly well, and just after conversations that he and I had, um, it dawned on me that I don't. Well, no, okay, no. To be fair, what the angle that I'm coming from, uh, what that was manifested itself at Franciscan, or maybe even at my Cal State, but I bring up this other staff member at where I was employed as a liturgy coordinator, because he and I would have conversations, and it was clear to him that what I stood for, what I believed, and what I shared, it wasn't, it didn't depend on, say, just for lack of other words, a group identity. I'm not gonna uh, promote something or advocate for something just because I'm from an immigrant family, just because I'm a Spanish speaker, just because I'm a quote unquote minority. No, everything that I say, believe, and think, it's just based on the end result of looking for the facts. Honestly, just my approach is not contingent on a group identity. And fast forwarding, at some point afterwards, this individual at a separate meeting, he said, Guillermo's a free thinker. And that's when it hit me. That's the approach that I'm coming from. Uh, and I've been that way for several years, but when this individual mentioned that, that's when it dawned on me. This is my charism, for lack of other words. So that's where I'm coming from.
All right. Let's find out if Charles is still there. Maybe he fell asleep.
No, I certainly didn't fall asleep.
All right, there you
Now
go.
with this black tea and this white tea, it's the oolong. It's very good. Well, first of all, thanks for your friendship, both of you guys, Guillermo and Jeremy, and for these conversations, and for having me be a part of this wonderful kind of fledgling group here, even though you guys have been doing this for a while. I guess I could start by sharing a couple of things about myself. Not that I'm at all interesting or anything, but I think what's drawing me here to these conversations is the seriousness at which we take philosophical and theological questions. That's number one. And I found that there's been this kind of wilderness, if you will, in the modern world amongst a specific age group, let's say the youth and the younger generations, who don't really have a forum or don't really have a place they can turn to discuss deep, serious philosophical and theological questions without irony, right? So like, without the comedy, right? Or without the kind of entertaining kind of quips and pop humor, let's say, but a place for real discussion and real serious philosophical and theological endeavor. And so this particular group, you guys are suited for that, and I really appreciate you guys having me here. So yeah, I'm a native of San Antonio, Texas. I'm a graduate of Central Catholic High School. That's actually where I started studying Aquinas. with a philosophy club that I started. It was just me and another guy who left seminary. We were in the back closet of a library studying Aquinas, according to his great books. The Britannica Great Books, his one little, or his 2 volumes. We just started reading that ourselves and called ourselves the Philosophy Club. So that was the very beginning of a kind of love and kind of being enraptured with theological questions. I've always been chasing the great books. Wanted to go to St. John's College right out of high school. We couldn't afford it. So I worked in sales for a while, got married early, and then eventually finished my undergraduate at Harvard studying psychology and economics, primarily because I wanted to go into psychiatry, but I realized I didn't want to spend like 12 years in school. So then I said, okay, well, I'll just probably just go into banking because that's what you do when you go to an Ivy League and you make some money and do your thing. So I got into banking for a while, a couple of years, and it wasn't working out. The entire time I had been hosting great book seminars in San Antonio, everything from Nietzsche, Machiavelli, pre-Socratics, Plato. So I've been doing that for a while. And then I heard of an institution that I work at now, a classical academy, where we get paid to teach great books. And I shot them my resume and did a teaching demo, and I got in, thank God. So I left banking. I've been teaching humane letters and economics for a little bit over a year and a half now, and continuing doing great book seminars. And again, I think most of my intellectual kind of interests span the gambit. I mean, anything from again, as I mentioned, the pre-Socratics to studying Michelangelo or Bach, 18th century German poetry. I'm also doing a master's at St. John's College right now on a fellowship where I'm focused on philosophy and theology. I've also done a bit more graduate work at Harvard, especially on Thomism and Nietzsche. So I'm sort of calibrated towards these types of questions and these types of discussions. But my main areas of interests are Augustine, Thomas, Pascal, Nietzsche, Heidegger, Strauss, and more recently, thanks to Jeremy, Hildebrand. And so studying Hildebrand, spending hundreds of dollars on his texts, they're all coming in the mail every week. And it's been just a refreshing thing to kind of see what I would consider a kind of antithesis to Heidegger. They both shared Husserl as a teacher. And so, we're reading Husserl right now, Jeremy and I, and some other faculty. But kind of spending so much time with Heidegger, and then seeing an antithetical kind of presentation of phenomenology and Hildebrand has been very refreshing, and his commitment to the church has also been very refreshing and anchoring, let's say. And ultimately, if you were to ask my kind of angle or what am I interested in here, is really kind of approaching why there's such a malaise in modernity. So I've been really wondering about the crisis of the modern world. What are the roots of that? You might say it's the Enlightenment. You might say it's the rationalism. But really thinking about the youth and thinking about the malaise, that discontentment, the disenchanted of the world, why we are experiencing such tremendous upticks in suicide rates and opioid addiction and all these other things. These are very practical problems that we need to be thinking about. And ultimately, I think, as you had alluded to earlier, Memo, it really is this kind of void in the human heart that needs to be filled. We need to discuss that. We need to think about that, take that very seriously. And so that's ultimately where I kind of see myself maybe fitting in and addressing those types of questions. So ultimately, again, facilitating profound dialogue for those that have been disenchanted to somehow re-enchant their world and share Christ, so that void can be filled.
Yeah, thank you. It's wonderful to hear a bit about your background. It's also been a lot of fun tormenting you with Husserl.
Yes.
That's something I'd definitely like to hear more about. And maybe we can even dedicate an episode to that, just who Husserl is specifically, and your guys's studying of Husserl, which does bring me to some of the things that I thought we could and should share, just because if you've if the listeners, if you've been on our website, you see that we have articles, or just overwhelmingly, of course, our approach has been pure articles, and they range from, yes, defending the magisterium, defending the Second Vatican Council, but also uh, to some extent culture and politics. So we've definitely done that as well, and some of those kinds of topics I think that we could talk about as well here in the podcast. One thing that I would like for us to get into in more detail next time is the catalyst, more specifically about what what drew us to begin Le Nouvel Esprit. Some other topics, of course, I'd like to talk about are, as I mentioned, Husserl and that branch of philosophy, phenomenology, existentialism, and personalism, and which could go into more detail about why the title Le Nouvel Esprit. I'd like to talk about that in the near future as well. And of course, we will continue to post articles. So as all, we are constantly working on new content. And as for the podcast episodes, we intend to do bi-weekly podcasts, and we look forward to it. This is exciting.
Um, before you think about wrapping up soon, Guillermo, or you still have more to mention?
That's all I have at the top of my head.
Okay, okay. I do want to mention that we have a Patreon page. If you go to patreon.com/Le Nouvel Esprit, Le Nouvel Esprit as one word, all lowercase, you can find our Patreon page and support us there. That'd be a great way to help us pay for our research. Requires a lot of books to do such, and kind of hurts every once in a while paying out of pocket. So, and so if you've been enjoying our content, please consider making joining a membership level on our Patreon. You can also find our information for making a PayPal donation on the website. You just go click on the top bar, click on donate. Um, be sure to stick around at the end of the month this January. Check out the website. We'll have a major update. There's a lot of new content coming live. And our topics are spanning, of course, Vatican II, more hermeneutics. We'll have some stuff on Husserl, and we'll have some stuff on aesthetics. I have two articles on aesthetics going up. Guillermo, did you have a essay on the luminous mysteries going live for this?
That is correct.
All right. So we will have a lot of content coming up.
Hmm.
So definitely check out our website near the end of the month. I think we'll have about 10, 12 new things. Um, Charles, did you have anything you wanted to add as far as future projects, what you're thinking about going in your inaugural work with us?
Yeah, I'll be posting a couple of things shortly, mainly revolving around Tolstoy's War and Peace, one treatment of Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, and some other considerations regarding aesthetics as I continue to plow through Hildebrand's aesthetics.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I certainly love War and Peace, one of my favorite novels.
Excellent, excellent. If I may share some of just my favorite topics, if you will. So I'm a huge fan of the intellectual dark web, abbreviated as the IDW, and I really love just a lot of those individuals' approach as well. I have my share of critiques of a lot of these individuals, and yeah, I hope and pray that in their search for the truth, because of course not all of them are Catholic, very few are, Yeah, my hope, just a huge hope that I have, is that their search for the truth will ultimately bring them home to the Catholic Church.
Can you say a bit more about the intellectual dark web?
The intellectual dark web, I would describe it as a network of thinkers who have the approach of, have a certain perspective in which our First Amendment rights are essentially a part of. So the First Amendment rights, of course, are our right to freedom of speech, freedom of thought and expression, freedom of religion, and freedom of association. I think I wouldn't even say loosely. Actually, I'm not sure, but they're liberal. I don't know if classical liberal is the right way to put it, insofar as they uphold these principles. Why? Because uh, these ideas need to be hashed out. So what universities used to do, we need it now more than ever. And part of the problem, coming from the left, just socially, culturally, politically, we're witnessing a form of censorship against individuals who either um, uh, dissent, are dissenting voices to begin with, or they are just individuals who don't fit the narrative. Um, Say, for example, we have people who, black people who criticize Black Lives Matter. We have, that's the first example that comes to mind. So the IDW, it's very based on free thought, insofar as they are against censorship. They are against this identity politics um approach against our search for the truth. Just real quick, some of the very influential individuals like Dr. Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, Larry Elder, they, somewhere in the mainstream media or on social media, they uh, debated whatever ideas that they were debating to the point where they proved their opponents wrong in such a mic drop way, I would say. And it just goes to show how reason and logic, we've kind of just abandoned that for the sake of identity politics more than anything. The situation is much more complex than that, but generally speaking, yeah, this intellectual dark web, it's a network of thinkers who call out this kind of persecution.
Yeah, and I just want to make one point to dovetail a bit on that, which is to say that criticism uh, has been extending, as you both know, into the higher realms of academia. So,
Oh yeah.
that the best schools are really just indoctrination machines where free thought and open discourse is not, in fact, the norm, but is actually now fringe, right? Like to have a dissenting thought is, it puts you automatically under the fringe. And so how we've gotten this far in our academic life in America, let's say, is just more evidence of the decline, let's say, of the West. Now, I try not to be as pessimistic as, let's say, Spangler, but I am uh, open to the possibility that we might be in a free fall, and we need to think about the ways in which we can correct some of that, let's say, call it spiritual decay in our civilization. So.
Yeah. And that reminds me of, I guess, two thoughts. One is Ratzinger. In one of his books, he raises a question: why in the Middle Ages is there's not a drug problem, whereas today there is. And it just goes back to this God-sized hole in each and every one of us. Middle Ages satisfied because they're religious, but today we don't. and you see that. And so when it comes to the censorship, there's very comedic and terrifying tale that Solzhenitsyn recounts in his The Gulag Archipelago. So at this local town hall meeting, the pro-communist leader, he's given a speech. He finishes. Everyone's clapping and they're standing up, roaring ovation. But they keep clapping 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You know, the speech can't be that good because one is just communist propaganda. But the speech, but the clapping just continues on and on because those people in the crowd knew if they stopped, the secret police would arrest them. And sure enough, once the first person stopped clapping, the police hauled that person off to the gulag. Never was seen again.
And for clarification, that's a true story.
That is a true story. The story comes from Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago.
Okay.
It's like a 1,500 page work. Solzhenitsyn calls it a literary investigation. So it's historical, but it's not written in the form of academic historical writing. It's more of a literary approach, which makes it very gripping and compelling.
No, I can imagine. Um, all right. No, then that's definitely the topic I think we should talk about as well. Just
Oh yeah.
yeah. So of course. Uh, well, yeah. There's so many vias we could take, but for now, I'm glad that we were able to introduce ourselves and just take this first step of putting ourselves out there.
Oh yeah. It'll
You
be a
know,
lot of fun.
bring it.
Awesome.
All right. And so we can go ahead and wrap this up. Uh, do either of you have any final thoughts, comments, concerns, prayer requests?
Number one, read Hildebrand.
Read
And then
Hildebrand.
and then number two, pray for my wife because she's pregnant with our fifth
Oh,
child. So
congratulations.
and just pray for us because we have a bunch of kids in a really small house. So
Great.
Yeah. That's what happens when you buy a bunch of books, Charles.
that's right.
That's exciting. Yeah, I guess current intention for me, I guess, will just be for our listeners can continue to pray for us and our
Mhm, mhm.
success of our project. That will, I think, I think that's what I would like for our intention.
Beautiful. I would certainly like to pray for everyone in the intellectual dark web
Conversion.
yeah, of course, for their that for their conversion, and for those who are already Catholic for their ongoing conversion, and they continue to spread the truth that comes from God ultimately. All right, that's it for our first episode for the Nouvel Esprit podcast. Thank you for listening. We bid you adieu.
You.